So happy with the decision and, in leaving where I was to take a chance on me. I think that that was the best decision I've ever made. It's changed my lifestyle almost entirely. It's turned out better than I thought it would, um, all the way around. And that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a lot of challenges and frustrations along the way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for our guest today, Mr. Paul Shannon. Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Phil. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. We've met a couple different times, so really looking forward to having a great conversation. So for our listeners, Paul, married with three kids, two girls and a boy. I think you said 11, 9, and 5. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So a busy man. Comes from a medical device sales background in the corporate world. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but he has a lot of experience in residential real estate as an active investor, but also as a passive investor, as a limited partner in a lot of different deals. He just spent a lot of time uh, evaluating different deals from different sponsors across the nation and investing in different deals and asset classes. And I think that's what led you to launching your own fund called InvestWise Collective. So maybe we'll come to that eventually, but tell me a little bit about the backstory and how we got to where we are today, Paul.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. As you mentioned, was in a corporate career as a medical device sales representative, and eventually got into more of a consulting role where I was traveling regionally and helping implement some of the more difficult technologies that we had as a company into the operating room. And in doing that, obviously, there's a lot of time commitments involved, a lot of time in the car, a lot of time in hotels. 11, 9, and 5, that's the age of my kids today. At the time where I was sort of frustrated with my life and not seeing that my values were aligning with where I wanted to spend my time versus where I was spending my time. I had my two daughters, my oldest kids, and my son was about to be born. And I just kind of saw the writing on the wall that I wasn't necessarily going to be the dad that I wanted to be. I remember missing a Halloween trick or treat night, and my daughters were all dressed up, and my wife sent me pictures, and I was traveling to a meeting that I had to be at, and was just really disappointed, and kind of that was a turning point for me where I thought I need to do something different here. So, I don't necessarily have specific skills other than just being a guy that likes to network, likes to talk. I have a sales background, and I was looking for sort of an entrepreneurial endeavor where I could get in with low barriers to entry. And I discovered real estate, as a lot of people do, as a way to, kind of create some passive income and potentially create a business long term around it. But to that point, I hadn't done much to write home about. But I had a few successful transactions where either flipped or bird a single family home. Bird meaning buy, renovate, rent it out, repeat after you refinance it. And I got all my money back out of the transaction. The flips went pretty well, and I was able to make some profits. And I saw, wow, I really controlled my time on these deals. I probably could do a lot more if I had more time and wasn't working 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week in my W-2. What's holding me back from trying to turn this into my lifestyle and my business, where I could call the shots and say, hey, if my kid has something going on, if they've got a performance, if they've got a sports game, if they've got trick or treating or whatever else might be in my schedule from a personal level, I can prioritize that and then get to work afterwards. So that was a really attractive proposition to me. And I decided to take the leap with the support of my wife and my family, and kind of gave myself like 2 years to make it work, and had invested passively as a limited partner prior to that as well. So kind of started to connect the dots as I worked my way through the business, and it ended up being more successful than I could have imagined. It certainly wasn't what I drew up before I left my job, things kind of unfolded very differently from what I projected, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, you can't always see the forest through the trees, and you have to keep taking step after step. So that was about 5 years ago now, and since then I've transacted on roughly 200 residential units. That's both in single family, small multifamily, and what I call mid-sized multifamily. That's 40 to 50 unit type buildings. And I've been a limited partner in roughly 50 deals, give or take. So I've kind of seen a lot of the different players and roles there are to operate real estate, and got into our fund, InvestWise Collective, just in the last 18 months, and now we're helping passive investors access deals that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get into. And earn passive income. These are for people that are busy professional lives like I once did, who like to participate in real estate but want to focus elsewhere. And ideally, we're trying to negotiate better terms with the sponsors that we do get involved in, so our
Yep.
investors have incentive to work with us.
Yeah. Well, I circled like 4 or 5 different things that I wrote down, and you said that I want to come back to. So we're gonna go back to the story a little bit here for a little bit. So first of all, you talked about aligning your values and your time, and the Halloween example was one. By the way, I find that when I think there's two impacts to that is one, you're not there physically for your kids during that event. But two, you're frustrated with yourself and therefore maybe not even as good of a dad when you are there because you're just frustrated with yourself. Not frustrated with kids, but you're just not as engaged or you're frustrated. So you feel that too. So there's almost a two-pronged impact of that. But was there an exercise you went through, like value aligning your values with your time? I guess if someone wants to figure out, is my time aligned to my values? How would I figure out how to answer that question?
Well, I'm going to paraphrase a quote, or a phrase that's been probably heard before by you, but really what I wanted to do was do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, with who I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to do it. And I wasn't really in control of any of those variables 6, 7 years ago. So I thought if I could get a handle on that, I could really decide and kind of figure out the path I wanted to take in my life. And if you're not right, and you're not in the right mindset or frame of mind to be a creator, to be an entrepreneur, to work and be motivated, like, you have to have the other things in your life basically aligned and feel good about those things and good about yourself before you can actually have the productivity and see what you're capable of in the business world. So I wanted to get those things right first, and they were way out of balance.
Yeah.
I was, not physically fit like I once had been in my 20s. I was having back pain, knee pain. Already mentioned, wasn't there for my kids, wasn't eating healthy, all these meals that we're having at night, entertaining clients and drinking bottles of wine and such. And I just saw this lifestyle that I was headed towards. And what was I going to look like when I was 60? I saw some of the managers that I worked for, and I didn't really want their positions anymore. When I was younger and I was early in my career, I would take a promotion, I would move around the country, and I was always hungry to what that next step might be within the corporate ladder, to climb that corporate ladder. And I just started to feel like the more and more I climbed it, the less and less I wanted to take that next rung. That person that was in that step, or that position right above me, their lifestyle just didn't seem like something that I wanted for my own. So I sort of had this vision, and it didn't end up panning out that way. And I was like, there
Yeah.
must be more to life than this. So
Yeah.
I thought I got to sort of balance everything and get the things right that are most important to me outside of work. And then once I do, then I'll take off, and I'll be ready. I'll be motivated. And that's what happened.
Yeah. Um, I love the question about like who do I want to hang around with? What do I want to be doing? How do I want to do that? And like taking more control of it. And I think those are great questions for people to ask themselves. Obviously defining the lifestyle. But I think the other thing is people, if you're whatever you're doing, pay attention to like not only think about where you think you want to be in 5 or 10 years from now, but pay attention to people that maybe they're 5 or 10 years older than you, or they're just kind of in that role that you think you want to be in 5 or 10 years, and pay attention to them. And it's not that you have to be that person or be like them, but just is the job or the career or what they're doing creating that? Like if everybody is like that, then I would be worried about it if you don't want to be like that. If there's just one person, you can be different than other people. But I think it's just really being observant and paying attention to others. And then the other thing that you talked about a lot with kids, and I just want to like when you're I referenced it a little bit, but I think when you're purposeful and feeling good about what you're doing professionally, you're more engaged, you're more energetic, you're a better father, and you're a better husband. And you're showing your kids too. Like, I also think you're teaching a lesson. I'm going home and I'm excited about what I'm doing at work. I'm passionate about it. I'm purposeful. It's more likely they will be passionate about it and purposeful with what they want to do when they're older. So I just think this work-life balance thing, people think it's like a compromise. No, these things need to support each other. And the better you are doing what that, like in alignment of who you want to be, the better you are at one thing, it's going to build and make the others better. It's not a fight for time. It builds upon each other.
Totally. And if you think about it with kids, like you only really have 18 years
Hmm.
where they're in the house, right? And for the first five or so, they're so young, they're picking up on, just the senses of the world, right? They're not really learning much of anything that you can pass on to them. Especially as a dad, I think moms and kids have a much closer connection at that point. But once they start talking, walking, are able to throw a baseball in the backyard and stuff, that's really where me as a dad anyways, I started to feel like, man, I have now 13 years left with these little guys and I need to kind of impart upon them the wisdom that I have and I just want to spend time with them, want to be around them. And when you're constantly gone, and you have the stressors of responsibility that other people put on you and it's not something that you're necessarily motivated towards, you're sort of working towards someone else's dream versus your own. Back to your point, yeah, the work wasn't aligned with what I wanted to be doing, so I probably wasn't as good of a dad during the time that I was there, so I wanted to get better at spending and maximizing the time that I did have with them, but also increasing the volume of the time. And it's worked out to be better than I could have expected. I'm home when they get off the bus a lot of days. We eat dinner together every single night, make dinner a lot of nights. Me and my wife trade off. So there's definitely like a just like a family sort of connection that I think was missing before when I was just sort of a part-time guy. I was more focused on earning and climbing that career ladder and being gone quite a bit. And I just saw them in passing when I could. And now it's more like I'm going to see them every time they're home. I'm going to be a part of everything that they have going on. I rarely miss a sports practice, never mind a game. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think just the understanding of your values and your time was not in alignment with them, and then just the shift to where you are today. And it's only been 5 years, but I just sense you're in such a better spot. But I want to ask, so you talked about the realization of lack of alignment. And then you just said you asked yourself the question, what's holding me back? And you said you took the leap. And it sounds like you took the leap before, you had some maybe reserves build up, but you did not have active revenue at the time. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong there, but what was holding you back and what gave you the confidence and courage to take the leap?
what was holding me back was the bird in the hand, right? Because I had talked about how I had a vision for my career before that didn't end up being reality as it came to fruition. And I wanted to be in medical device sales. I was a sales guy. That was sort of one of the top echelon sort of sales roles that you could get. Compensation was really good, and I had achieved that and was there. I had arrived, and it was just sort of like if I can hang on to this job, I can meet my financial goals without question if I just continue to do what I'm doing. And that was certainly a choice that I could have made, and we would have worked out fine, but I would have left behind a lot of the other things that were important to me in that decision-making process. So what made me sort of take the leap, we did have, some savings. We were always diligent about putting away money and not living outside of our means and deferring gratification. So we had a good nest egg. My wife is very motivated. She's a very type A person, enjoys her career and wants to work no matter how much money we were able to accumulate. So it's also a benefit to have consistent stability and income with her role and also healthcare, frankly. So, and with her support, that was really what drove the decision. If she had been of the mindset that I needed to, take the traditional path and be consistent, and I had a good career and I need to stick with it, then I probably would have done that. Not wanting to, rock the apple cart, so to speak. So she basically said, this is not something you're happy with. We want you around more often. We could be a better family unit. We believe in you and take the chance. And it was sort of like between the two of us, we thought, what's the biggest risk at this point? And to me, I made the comment I remember saying like I feel like the biggest risk is not taking a chance on myself at this point to have a different life than what I have today, for us to have a different life than we have today. And at that point, it was like, well, let's just give this a run. Let's see how it goes for 2 years. And if in 2 years it's a complete failure, what could we do? Well, I could always fall back on my prior career, and I have a
Right,
pretty good story to tell in an interview, right?
right,
So, people don't necessarily frown upon a comeback story or somebody who's admittedly failing in some endeavor but is ready to get up off the mat. What do you do when you fall down? You get back up. So I think if you could tell a story about failure and spin it in a positive way of how you become a better person, because everybody fails, right?
right.
Michael Jordan talks about it. He talked about the only reason he's been so successful is because he's failed more than anybody else. And I think that's just part of the world. And there'll be more failures that I'll have to conquer, but I'll just keep going. So I think, from that standpoint, it was like that's the worst case scenario, and it turned out to be much better.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things there. First of all, you said you have 2 years to figure it out, and then in 2 years if we don't. But I think the key there is you don't have to have every single thing figured out before you took the leap. You also have to recognize you have 2 years to keep figuring this out because you said earlier in the episode that it rolled out way different than you planned. So you spent all the time before you took the leap figuring out exactly how this was going to go. It didn't go that way. It went a completely different direction, but you figured it out and you're still here 5 years later in a great spot and with time alignment to your values. So that was just a takeaway. And then the other thing is the idea of the biggest risk is not taking the leap or not betting on yourself. You said it a little bit differently, but like the term betting on yourself, I think is so important because I think so many people want to believe they can do it. They have something they want to do. They don't place the bet. They don't take the leap. Like, is there anything you did there? I mean, like really and maybe you didn't overthink it. You talked about like the nest. Like, is there anything like what would you? I guess what would you tell our listeners? Like, why should they bet on themselves?
Oh, I definitely overthought it. I mean, I overthought it for like a decade. I was never really content with, my day to day and thinking that, boy, I got like 30, 40 more years of this. This is going to be really tough to get through. And I had the Sunday night blues like no other. So I had analysis paralysis. I read, 50 books. I knew a lot about book smarts and nothing about street smarts. And I don't think that's worth nothing. I mean, I think people should get an education. They should network. They should have coffee meetings with people that are in positions that they want to aspire to be in. They should read. They should not just take risks without throwing caution to the wind per se. But at some point, you just have to act.
Yep.
People that get things done do so by doing. And it's as simple as that. You can sit around and talk about things or think about things and how they could be different, but until you actually get out there and do it, you're really going to be stuck in the same place until you take that action. So for me, as you mentioned, like it was a lot different than what I drew up when I left. It was early 2019 for my career. And at that point, I envisioned, flipping or burring single family homes only, had no aspirations to be in larger stuff, didn't even think about it, didn't think it was even possible, really. I thought that I would have, one project, then maybe I'd get two or three going at the same time. So I'd have, a Rolodex of contractors and start to build relationships so that I could keep them busy, then I could scale into this property management company. I was managing my own rentals. I got it up to about 10 units and then realized a few things, like quite a few things. But the high points is that I was a terrible property manager and I didn't like it at all. And it was not my core competency whatsoever. And I couldn't even imagine doing that for other people, never mind doing it for myself if I started to grow much faster. So that was one thing. Two was I couldn't keep contractors busy enough, and I had a ton of problems with contractors. So I started to figure out, who's loyal to me, how to structure contracts, how to reward good work, how to fire people quickly that don't live up to their honor and their, what they say they're going to do, basically. And my strategy stopped working too. Like I was burring properties where I was basically able to refinance if I wanted to more than I put into the property when I go to the refi table. So I wouldn't do that because that's over leveraging. But I would at least be able to get out what I put into the
Right.
property and keep
Right.
that finite amount of capital rolling up to, about a year into my endeavor as an entrepreneur in real estate. And then it stopped working. So I saw that I was able to get less and less out as the market cycle kind of continued on, and I was going to run out of money. And that was before I started borrowing private money and such. But it had me exploring other markets, and I ended up looking at tertiary markets where the cash flow was a little bit better, the market conditions would allow for that same strategy to
Yep.
work. And around me where I could drive to and from whatever market I would get into within a day's time period. And I ended up getting into Evansville, Indiana, which is about a 3 hour drive away
Yeah.
from me. Fortuitously found a guy who had his face and name on a listing of a property that I was interested in. Gave him a call. We ended up getting together for coffee. He was a property manager and managed roughly 1,000 units in town there. I ended up buying a house at auction, sight unseen. I hired him on a chance to see if he could do what he said he could do, and they renovated the property. They leased it up. He managed it for me for quite some time. We kept doing more and more transactions together. Late 2019, we bought about 20 units and went through some heavy rehabs on some older properties that were vacant. Um, he just kept building trust, basically. Eventually became my partner. And I think one of the biggest sort of light bulb moments for me as an entrepreneur is that I can't do everything by myself. I can't be such a control freak that I think I can do this better than somebody else. First of all, there's things you don't want to do as a person. For me, one of those things was property management. So to be able to outsource that, having the experience that I had, although it was limited with 10 or so units, was helpful because now I can kind of manage the manager. I know what
Right.
the day-to-day looks like. I know what a phone call looks like at 2 in the morning. I know how to hire contractors, all these things. So it's helpful to get a baseline understanding, but at a certain point, you have to offload some of those responsibilities so you can do what you're good at as an entrepreneur, and you can't do everything. So it being 3 hours away from me, Evansville, I had no choice but to relinquish some control. And I think for me, as someone who has a hard time doing that on occasion, it was healthy because I couldn't see the property every day. I couldn't micromanage it. I couldn't be there on site once, every about 3 weeks or so. I would go down when we had some projects going on. So to me, that was a really big learning experience. But back to the original question about like how did things like change and what the path looked like now versus what I thought it might look like when I left my career. Completely different. And now I'm more on the acquisition side, looking for deals and allocating capital and raising capital from different investors. So that's the part I enjoy a lot more than the property management side. And I actually do like the project management side too. So I still
Yeah.
do some of that. But there's so many roles in real estate, so many directions you can take.
There is. There is. Just a couple of big takeaways there, man. We talked about betting on yourself, kind of, taking that risk, but also bet on your ability to figure things out, right? Like that's what you said is you didn't. By the way, you said you procrast. That made me feel better because I procrast the same decade you were procrastinating. I think I was too on something at the time. So, that was good. The other thing is you said like you said earlier, at some point you have to take action, and I think there's this perception out there that we have to take like massive action. And massive action means this really big, overwhelming action that it just is scary. Well, for you, that massive action that led to a lot of things, what I heard was you called a phone number on a sign, right? Like it was a really small action, but maybe you did that a lot. Like I'm sure that's not the only phone number on a sign you ever called. You probably have called a lot of them, but stop on the side of the road, make a phone call, all of a sudden, hey, let's grab coffee and look how that evolves. So I just think there's this misperception of taking action means this has to be scary, big, you know, actions that we're fearful of versus no, just make a simple phone call, just dial 7 digits or whatever and just see where it goes. If it doesn't go anywhere, it took you 3 minutes, right? So I don't know. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I disagree with the phrase massive action. I've been critical about it before. I've heard it many times, and I think it's wrong. I think that action means consistency and process and constantly refining that process as you continue to take steps forward. The journey of 1,000 steps starts, or a journey of 1,000 miles, excuse me, starts with one step, right? So you have to take the step to see the next phase and see the forest through the trees. an action can be as small as just doing something every day, committing to yourself. Let's say it's an hour. If you're a busy professional and you don't have the time to dedicate to an entrepreneurial endeavor full time, what if you could just carve out an hour a day and set up a really productive hour? You're on the phone, you're cold calling, you're, writing a business plan, whatever it is that you're interested in doing. If you can do it consistently, you'll see results. And I think you'd be amazed at how far you can go if you do that for 50, 100, 150 days into the future. And you'll look back and say, why didn't I get started on this sooner? Like it just seems like it's insurmountable when you look at it from the first phase or the first day. Say, I'm never going to get there. And where you want to get to will probably change as you take the steps. So
Yes.
it's just important to keep moving forward.
Agreed. You can't connect the dots forward, but take the this yeah, and I'm probably guilty of saying like take big action, like have courage, take big action. But a lot of times it's not. Maybe it's the courage to do the first phone call if that's not what you do, but it's more about take the first step and then be consistent, right? Don't take the massive step, take the first step and then be consistent, I think would be the message we're coming to here.
The massive step is the one that's the most risky. Like if you're just going to take massive action, you have a massive chance of failing. I
Yeah,
think there's a rite of passage to everything, right? And as you earn your badges and earn your stripes along the way, fail fast, but keep some chips on the table. Don't bet at all and then be wiped out. I think when you're talking about real estate investing, specifically, staying in the game is most important, preserving
yeah,
principal, right? So it's like if you go out there and you take this massive action and you lose your own money, all of it, if you lose your investors' money, you don't get a second chance there. But
right.
if you make small mistakes along the way, which everybody will and does, you've got a chance to learn from those mistakes and then take the next step forward.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of risk there to understand, which is if you're going in a different direction, like so let's say you've had a lot of success in this business type or real estate, multifamily, whatever it might be, but you're shifting to a different business, a different asset class. You don't want that to be both different and the biggest deal you've ever done. You can do different in a small deal, or the biggest deal maybe isn't something you know extremely well, but you probably don't want it to be both different and a massive risk, as you said. So I like how you framed that up. What was, um, you talked about a mindset shift, a little bit of being, um, of delegating, but what was there other mindset shifts you had like that were significant along the way that you learned, whether it's recently or before you even, before you left your job?
I would go back to the process comment. I mean, when you're working in a corporate career, you sort of have your processes defined for you. I mean, you have some autonomy and you can go out and you run your business in your local territory if you're a sales rep the way you kind of want to, but you're getting the company resources, you're getting your manager checking in on key performance indicators, you're responsible for a certain amount of administrative requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So you do have some freedom, but you're somewhat in a box. When you're an entrepreneur, it's just wide open. I mean, you can do whatever you want. Frankly, if I just wanted to wake up in the morning and didn't want to do anything that day, I don't have to, right? So it's like if you get into that sort of comfort where you've got all this flexibility and freedom, but no structure whatsoever, then you're really not going to progress as fast as you could. So I was guilty of that, not sitting around doing nothing necessarily, but just having a little less structure to my day. So the process piece came in and I started, kind of mapping out my days before they happened the night before and looking at my mornings and how do I get myself off to a good start because the start is the most important. So I would do stuff for myself, my mind, my body first. I would get my mind right by reading 10, 15 pages in a book, doing some self-affirmation, meditation, maybe. I'd work out. I'd get that out of the way. So I knew that for me, like that was important because if I got busy during the day, sidetracked, and ended up not having time to do that workout, it would affect me mentally and I just wouldn't be all there. So
Yep.
I'd see my kids off to school, these types of things. I do some writing, social media, or just, planning, whatever it might be. So dealing and helping my mind and my body first were huge to me and getting that piece of the day out of the way. So by roughly 9 o'clock, it was on to the races as far as just the work day is concerned. And I would already
Yeah.
have my goals for that day lined up the night before on what I needed to accomplish. What does my schedule look like? Where do I have gaps in phone calls or Zoom meetings where I can get other key objectives done? What are the main nuggets for the day and what do I need to do to work towards those day by day? every day. So
Yep.
just having a little bit more structure that's sort of self-imposed was super helpful for me.
Yeah, I think Covey has a quote, plan your week every week before the week begins. Same thing for the day. Like if you do that in the morning. And then I think like I had a day, I think last week where I woke up and like kind of probably tired and like just mentally I was like, man, this like it feels heavy today or whatever it might be. And then I went through my morning routine and I had a little bit of quiet time, prayer time, workout. I have a sauna. I sat in the sauna. Like by the time I'm done with that, I'm like, man, I'm ready to go. And I'm a much better state of mind going into work because I spend the time on that every day than if I just wake up, log into the computer or whatever, and go straight to work. Like I would be yeah, it probably wouldn't be good. So I think just get your mind right. I like that phrase, get your mindset right as well. Um, and then the Covey thing too. So
You
where did
said something,
your
Phil, if you don't mind, I want to
yeah,
touch on it. I think it's important. Like I used to be somebody who'd look at the future, like more than I'd look and be in the present. And I had to forcefully kind of stop doing that. My goals were, 10 years, 20 years out when I was in the corporate world. And I still have those types of goals, but they're so vague, right? It's so hard to see what your priorities will even be because I've realized that as I've grown older, things that are important to me when I was 30 or were important to me when I was 30 are not as important to me today as I'm
hmm
43. So I try to like make those goals much more shorter term, but always working towards the long-term vision, which is, not necessarily set in stone, but just always progressing. So my goals tend to be much more like a month long. And what do I need to get to that next layer, right? And sometimes I miss the target. It takes 3 months instead of a month, but sometimes it happens faster. But it's because you kind of break things down: monthly goal, weekly goal, daily goal, hourly goal. And if you do that in kind of bite-sized increments, it makes each step a little bit easier to handle.
what would be like a monthly goal you have right now that you're like maybe a newer one even that you're working on if you're willing to share?
Yeah,
Put you on the
so
spot a little
we
bit.
we
Sorry.
talked about InvestWise Collective.
Yeah.
We are, on the hunt for common equity position deal where we can allocate $1 million to a sponsor's deal. And this is how to be somebody that's in our network that we know, but we're on the phone. We're trying to source deals. We're seeing deals. We're underwriting deals. We want to commit to a deal and have capital raised for that within the next 2 months. So we need to commit to the deal within the next 30 days. We're very active there. I'm selling an asset of mine. I'm trying to close that. That's going to be closing by November 7th, hopefully. So that's a goal too, is to get the buyer everything that they need and make their due diligence process as easy as possible so this transaction can happen. So those types of goals.
Yeah. Awesome. We talked a little bit about mindset, like mindset shifts, but if you just even step back more, like where would you say your mindset came from?
Uh, it's discipline rooted. I've always been, very interested in fitness. It's been a big part of my life. So, I have not accomplished some things in that space that I'd like to, like Ironman type competitions and such. Never done that. So there's people that are certainly more experienced and I look up to when it comes to that sort of thing. But just getting into, physical fitness and routine is just so important for my mindset. I've done it forever, and I've always done it with the approach that if I don't feel like doing it, doesn't mean I don't do it. Sometimes the best days are the ones where you push through that sort of, I'm kind of not in the mood. I don't really feel like being in the gym, but just getting down there and powering through the workout, whether that's a
Yep.
run. But I always find that like training towards something is helpful for me. I'm training for a half marathon right now. It's a 14-week program, so it's sort of a shorter term goal. And again, back to the goals, like it's every week, what's the mileage? How do I break that down on a daily basis? How do I knock this out? And I really don't love running. So it's like sort of a, way to test my fortitude. Like, am I going to
Yep.
get out there? Am I going to do this? Am I going to keep the promises that I made to myself? If
Mm-hmm.
not, like it's going to impact my self-esteem because if I can't do that, then what can I do? Right. So it's
Yeah.
like just get out there and get it done, dude. And when I'm done with it, I feel much better about everything. So I just feel like there's positivity when it comes to that sort of discipline.
What half marathon are you running? I'm running my first one ever in a couple weeks from now. Like, yeah. Uh,
Nashville.
okay. Oh man, that's a good one. I heard that's a really good one.
Yeah,
So
I hear
when
it's
is that?
hilly, so I'm not quite ready for
Yeah,
that.
good luck. I'm not doing it. When is
Indiana
that?
doesn't have the hills to train
Right,
on.
right. Neither
It's
does Ohio.
Saturday the 26th.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The week before, well, the Columbus Children's one is the week before. So the train, but it's good. Like for me, I'm doing it, and it's the mental challenge. Like I've come to enjoy running more but I'm also trying to show the kids too, like, hey, I set a goal. I'm spending the time every week to do it. Like I get home, I'm tired, I'm sweaty, I'm disgusting, and they're seeing that in my daughter, like, hey, how much did you run today? Like she's very much will act like she is not interested, but she's just a little bit interested because she's 13 and that's just what you do. But she is
Yeah.
a little bit interested and she's like, "Oh, he's working toward a goal. It's not easy, and I'm gonna do it too." So I think doing things and setting challenges up for yourself. I really like the phrase keeping the promises you make to yourself because I think it's honestly it's interesting on goals and like even personal goals is we set these goals, but when we don't hit them, it's almost like a negative. What's your thought process on that? It's a negative because then we didn't keep that promise to ourselves. A goal is a promise to ourselves in a way, and we didn't keep it. But we don't want people to feel bad about the goal they didn't hit. But at the same time, goals are important. Like we should set goals. So I don't know. Help me think through that a little bit more.
That's a good one. Usually when anybody sets a goal, they set some arbitrary timeline as to when they're going to meet that goal, right? And that timeline, in my opinion, is not up to us. That's up to God. So, I think if you put in the work every day and you trust the process and you constantly refine where find shortcomings, where you fail and you fall down, eventually you'll get to where you want to be. The outcome is inevitable at that point. It's just, are you going to quit or not? So I think that uh, when it comes to goals, it's important to set them. It's important for them to be measurable, achievable, but high enough of a bar where it's not so easy that it doesn't mean much to you as a person. It's got to hurt, right? It's got to be something you have to sacrifice for it to be good. Nothing easy in life is worth much of anything. So you're going to have to work for it. And I would say, there's been goals that I've set that I haven't hit and yet, but I will. And it's just a matter of continuing on the path and keep striving for those things. So
I like the word yet, and I there was a different discussion I had a couple weeks ago, but just about setting your goals is like who you're going to be, what you're going to do, not what result you're going to get. And your point is you can't, I'm a believer in like extreme ownership, discipline, as you said, and you're like you're rooted in discipline. I believe that, but at the end of the day, I don't control everything, right? I God has control. I can't control the timeline or the ultimate result, but I can control the actions and steps and who I'm being, what I'm doing, and then whatever the result is, the result is. So, um,
well said.
if you really step back and reflect, how does what you've done, how does what you're doing, how does it make you feel?
From a professional standpoint or from a personal standpoint or
Yes.
all together,
Hmm.
just the
How does
whole
it?
aura. Um, I feel great, man. I mean, I really do. Like I'm so happy with the decision and, in leaving where I was to take a chance on me. I think that was the best decision I've ever made. It's changed my lifestyle almost entirely. It's turned out better than I thought it would. Um, all the way around. And that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a lot of challenges and frustrations along the way. I think that's just part of life, no matter what path you choose. And I think that's the spice of life too, right? It's like when I see challenge now, I look at it as an opportunity versus like, oh man, I'm defeated. I can't do this. Like I'm not gonna. No, like it's like where can I find the good in this, and how is this gonna make me a better person, better entrepreneur, better father, better husband, better friend, whatever it is. It's completely like remapped my sort of like brain wavelengths. Like
Yeah.
I'm ready to conquer right now, and it's like that confidence comes from just doing and realizing that, okay, there's something in front of me right now that's got some headwinds and it's maybe going to have some things about it that aren't pleasant, but we're going to get through this. And if you have that mindset and you feel like you can overcome challenges, you can. So it's just a matter of what you believe. And to me right now, like I just believe that I made the right choice and whatever's ahead of me, I'm excited about.
And you said earlier that your mindset came from like discipline rooted, but also like you can tell that your mindset, what you just said is your mindset now and your belief in yourself, your willingness to take chances on you is, I'm sure, stronger than it was 5 years ago because of that, because taking that chance. I mean, that phrase is one of my favorite phrases I've heard is like, I'm so happy that I took the chance on me. That is like a really, really cool phrase. So just rewind back to what Paul said the last 2 or 3 minutes and listened to that a couple times. That was absolutely fantastic. What do you think your key factor to success and fulfillment will be moving forward?
I think happiness is the number one goal. And that looks different for every person. So I'm not here to tell you what that should look like, but um, that's the ultimate goal for me. And, if I can do that through working smarter and not harder and, spending time where I want to spend it, I'm going to do that. I think that the you can't sit around on a beach and drink Mai Tais for very long before you get bored, right? So I like to travel. I like to take vacations. I like to take active vacations, but sometimes I do like just sitting on the beach, but I get bored of that pretty
Yeah,
quickly if I'm not mentally engaged, if I'm not stimulated and challenged mentally. So for me, that outlet is real estate and my real estate business, but I don't want to let that become such a overwhelming factor that it imbalances the rest of my life like
yeah,
work did at one point. So I'm constantly trying to like keep that in check. Like, yes, I have ambition. Yes, I want to grow. Yes, I want to have, more assets under management, more units in my portfolio, more money, right? Like I want all those things, of course, but not at the expense of everything else that's important to me.
yeah.
So I think it's just about having a well-rounded life for me. That's what makes me happy. And if things are out of balance, I need to dedicate more time to whatever it is that is not quite in balance. So just having the flexibility to do that and be um, mindful of where those opportunities to grow as a person are and to be able to dedicate my personal resources towards those. That's what makes me happy and that's what I'm excited about for the future is just to continue to grow.
I like that, and just I mean, I like how this conversation really went full circle to your initial reason for when I asked you about your story. You said you were out of alignment, like your time wasn't aligned to your values, and now you said, hey, happiness for me is basically aligning my time to my values and staying in balance. So, uh, great stuff. What has been a really like the most impactful book that you've read and why? Personal, professional, whatever.
Hmm. There's so many good ones out there. I'm a big student of financial history. I like to see what's in, the day-to-day news and understand what's happening with financial markets and but a lot of times in those publications, whether it's online or the Wall Street Journal or whatever, there's sort of like a sensationalism, right? Or there's an over um, sort of amplification of the consequences of whatever that particular situation that's unfolding. Take the federal funds rate, for example, up and
Right.
down, and like everybody's
Yep.
overreacting to what is going to happen in the market. Like the next day, it's like, come on, these are things that take time to play out. And it's kind of why I like real estate as an investment class because you can see out into the future a little bit easier, maybe than you can with stocks and bonds, and you can control things. Things happen a lot slower. But I really like reading about financial history and tying today's news into what's happened in the past because as Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself but it sure does rhyme. So you can kind of draw these parallels and think about like how could what's happening today relate back to what's happened already. And one book that tells that story extremely well is called The Devil Take the Hindmost by Edward Chancellor. And I just thought it was fascinating to read about like the tulip mania going back to the Dutch in the 1600s, the South China Sea debacle, just all these different financial market bubbles, the Japanese stock market bubble of like the early and into the 80s. Um, just fascinating stuff. And I just thought that was a great book. And the other one is The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I feel like every
Oh,
time everybody's read that book, right? That's interested
very interesting.
in financial markets and just kind of eye-opening to how the world actually works and how governments and central banks and wars and all this other stuff are tied together. It just
I
gives you a lot different
I
perspective.
feel like there's something brewing here, like the financial like Paul Shannon, the financial historian, or something here. Like there's something to this, so I love it. By the way, The Creatures of Jekyll Island, such an interesting. If you're kind of interested in what Paul's talking about, is a really interesting book about how the Federal Reserve was created. So I and it's yeah, just very intriguing. So, Mr. Historian, how can our thank you so much. First of all, I'm joking there, but I try to take notes through this, like what's like just really phenomenal clips and takeaways throughout. And I have like five, six, seven different items where I'm like, okay, maybe that's it or that's it. Like, so thanks for just making so many good points and just sharing your mindset, your belief, kind of the evolution of that and articulating it really, really well. I really appreciate it. And I think this is going to be really impactful for our listeners. So thank you so much. Paul, how can people find out more about you?
Well, first off, Phil, I want to thank you for the opportunity. It's been a fun conversation, a little bit different interview than I've had in the past, and I appreciated it. So thank you. If you want to connect with me, the best way to do it is on LinkedIn. My handle is just Paul Shannon, my name. And then if you want to check out our business, InvestWiseCollective.com is our fund.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I'm looking forward to the book on financial history from Mr. Paul Shannon. But no, definitely, just joking aside, check out Paul on LinkedIn. I know he's active there, InvestWise Collective too, and he's just got a lot of experience as an active investor and passive investor, 50 deals himself, so he knows what he's doing here. So check out Paul. Paul, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.